Everybody knows who Homer is, an almost mythical poet who wrote the Iliad and Odyssey. His poems sing of the glorious deeds of people who lived during the heroic age: Achilles and Hector, Agamemnon and Odysseus. But few people know Hesiod. Hesiod was a poet almost contemporary with Homer, perhaps a little later than him. Two poems are attributed to Hesiod: Theogony, which details the generations of the gods of Greek mythology, while also telling the story of how Zeus and the Olympians came to be the dominant power in the world, and Works and Days, a more down-to-earth poem. It is written as a letter to Hesiod's brother, Perses, about how to be a good man and a successful farmer, two objects which seem to be the same for Hesiod. The reason, perhaps, Hesiod is not so popular compared to Homer is that his poetry is simply not as good as Homer's. Hesiod's poems, especially the Theogony, lack the poetic imagery and piercing similes that the Iliad and Odyssey possess. However, I don't think it is productive to view Hesiod as a second or even third-rate poet in comparison to Homer. Rather, I think that Hesiod should be viewed as supplementary to Homer. The great Homeric epics are the main course, while Hesiod's poems act like appetizers or hors d'oeuvres. The Iliad clocks in at 15,693 lines of Greek poetry, and the Odyssey is 12,110 lines long. Hesiod's poems, on the other hand, are much shorter. The Theogony is only about 1,000 lines, and Works and Days is even shorter, at just over 800 lines. Furthermore, the subject matter of the two poems complement the great Homeric epics. The Theogony gives us a comprehensive pantheon of the Greek gods that are behind almost every action in the Iliad and Odyssey. The Theogony is kind of like a prequel to the Iliad. It sets up the universe that Homer operates in. The poem even ends with the birth of Achilles, the main hero of the Iliad. Works and Days, on the other hand, gives us a picture of life during the Greek Archaic Age, when Homer's poems were being written down along with Hesiod's. Now, on to the Theogony. The Theogony begins much like the Iliad and the Odyssey, with an invocation of sorts, calling upon the muses of Olympus to help the poet sing his song. With the Heliconian muses let us start our song. They hold the great and godly mount of Helicon, and on their delicate feet they dance around the darkly bubbling spring and round the altar of the mighty Zeus. Hesiod tells us how the muses bathe in the springs, then dance atop the mountain called Helicon, while singing hymns to the Olympians and other deities. Helicon is the name of a mountain located in Boeotia, where Hesiod is believed to have lived. It was at Helicon that Hesiod first encountered the muses, who taught him how to sing sweet song while he was tending to his lambs on the holy mountain. The first thing the muses let Hesiod know was this: "You rustic shepherds, shame! Bellies you are, not men. We know enough to make up lies which are convincing, but we also have the skill, when we've a mind, to speak the truth." With this, the muses tell Hesiod, and us, a secret about poetry. Its lovely sound and rhythm tell the truth, but it can also make a lie that seems true. This admitting of the duplicity of poetry reflects the honesty of Hesiod, who can be imagined as a gruff and simple shepherd tending to his flocks while singing songs to the gods. Hesiod goes on about the muses. It is only appropriate as the muses ordered the poet to sing about themselves at the beginning and end of every song. There are 9 muses, to be exact, and Hesiod names all of them, something he is wont to do. Cleo, the muse of history; Irtope, the muse of song and lyric poetry; Melpomene, the muse of tragedy; Thalia, the muse of comedy; Erato, the muse of love poetry, Terpsichore, the muse of the dance, Polymnia, the muse of hymns, Urania, the muse of astronomy, and the most important of all, Calliope, the muse of epic poetry. Different traditions hold that there are differing numbers of muses with differing functions. However, Hesiod's list is the oldest and most well known. The muses were born to the union of Zeus and the goddess Memory. Their only thought is singing, to please the ears and minds of gods and men, to make people forget evil and provide rest from pain. In a savage world, music is sometimes the only respite from pain and worry. The muses also act as Olympian propagandists, foremost for their father Zeus, for they sing his praises, how high he is above the other gods, how great in strength. The muses also work in the mortal realm. They bless certain mortals with the ability to speak well and be persuasive. Of this, Hesiod sings, "And when the daughters of great Zeus would bring honor upon a heaven-favored lord, and when they watch him being born, they pour sweet dew upon his tongue, and from his lips flow honeyed words. All people look to him when he is giving judgment uprightly, and speaking with assurance he can stop great quarrels sensibly. Wise lords are wise in this. When public harm is being done to the people, they can set things straight with ease, advising with soft words. And when a lord comes into assembly, he is wooed with honeyed reverence, just like a god, and is conspicuous above the crowd. Such is the muse's holy gift to men." So, according to Hesiod, the muses also bestow a practical ability to mortal men, and in a sense, Hesiod is talking about himself, and justifying why anyone should listen to his words and take them to heart. Hesiod himself was gifted by the muses in the art of singing and making sweet song. He, in essence, is speaking for the gods. "Hail, daughters of Zeus, give me sweet song, to celebrate the holy race of gods who live forever, sons of starry heaven and earth, and gloomy night and salty sea. Tell how the gods and earth arose at first, and rivers and the boundless swollen sea, and shining stars and the broad heaven above, and how the gods divided up their wealth, how they shared their honors, how they first captured Olympus with its many folds. Tell me these things, Olympian muses, tell from the beginning, which first came to be." The actual creation myth, the Theogonia, literally the creation of the gods, does not start until over 100 lines of poetry dedicated to the muses, showing how much Hesiod really values them. Chaos was first, Hesiod tells us, then next appeared Gaia, or broad-bosomed earth, then misty Tartarus in the deep recesses of earth, then Eros, or love, came to be, that which makes men weak, overpowers the clever mind, and tames the spirit in the breasts of men and gods. Chaos produced Nyx, or the night, and Erebos, the shadow in dark deepness. Nyx gave birth to Aether, or space, and Hemere, or day, in love with Erebos. Then Gaia, the earth, produced of her own cause Uranos, the heaven. He was an equal to herself, to cover her all over and to be a resting place, always secure for all the blessed gods. Then again, without pleasant love, Gaia bore the lifeless sea, Pontus. Now, Hesiod tells us about 3 sets of children born from the marriage of Gaia and Uranos, heaven and earth. First, the Titans. Of these there are 12, named Oceanus, the enormous ring of water that encircles the world, then Koios, intelligence, Crius, then Iapetos, and Hyperion, and Thea, and Rhea, and Themis, and Nemosthene, the mother of the Muses, then Tithes, then Phoebe, the Titaness of prophecy, and last, the most terrible of heaven's sons, crooked scheming Kronos, who hated his father. Second, Gaia and Uranos produced the insolent Cyclops, Brontes, Steropes, and Arges. Later on, these gods with a single eye would find the thunder and lightning for Zeus. Hesiod says that strength and energy and craft were in their works. Third, they bore 3 more sons, the Hecatoncheires, Kotos, Gues, and Briareus, unspeakable and violent creatures, each with 100 arms and 50 heads, and terrible strength. With the Cyclops and the Hecatoncheires, Uranos was disgusted and hid them away inside Gaia. Heaven was pleased with this wickedness, but Gaia was strained and stretched, being forced to hold her children inside herself. Gaia groaned with discomfort. To remedy her situation, she came up with a plan. She created gray adamant and made a mighty sickle from it. Taking it in her hand, she spoke to her sons. "My sons, whose father is a reckless fool, if you will do as I ask, we shall repay your father's wicked crime, for it was he who first began devising shameful acts." All the Titans were seized with fear and did not speak, except the youngest, wily Kronos. He answered his mother with bold words. "Mother, I undertake to do the deed. I do not care for my unspeakable father, for he first thought of shameful acts." Gaia was pleased with her son. She put Kronos in a hiding place and gave him the saw-toothed scimitar, the sickle made of gray adamant. Uranos came with the night to envelop Gaia and make sweet love with the earth. But Kronos, hidden away, reached up with his left hand, and in his right was the sickle, which he eagerly used to harvest his father's genitals. Kronos tossed his father's manhood behind him, and the remains did not go to waste. The drops of blood that poured from the wound seeped into Gaia, and after a year's time she gave birth to the Furies, the giants, and the ash nymphs called Meliae. The genitals of heaven, however, landed in the sea and were carried about on the waves for a long time. They began to foam, and an immortal girl started to grow within. The frothy ballsack of Uranos eventually landed at Cyprus, and from it emerged a beautiful goddess, Aphrodite. Eros is her companion. Fair desire followed her from the first, both at her birth and when she joined the company of the gods. From the beginning, both among gods and men, she had this honor and received this power. Fond murmuring of girls, and smiles, and tricks, and sweet delight, and friendliness and charm. After this, Uranos was disappointed in his children, and so called them Titans, or strainers, for they strained in insolence, and did a deed for which they would be punished afterwards. Night then bore, although she lay with none of the gods, many terrible abstractions: blame and distress, nemesis, deceit, and love, age and strife, and the hateful strife gave birth to more: work, forgetfulness, famine and pains, battles and fights, murders and killings, quarrels, lies, stories, disputes, lawlessness and ruin, and oath. Night also gave birth to the Hesperides, who tend the golden apples beyond the ring of Oceanus, and the destinies and the fates, goddesses who track down the sins of men and gods and never cease from awful rage until they give the sinner punishment. However, not all that came to be during the reign of Kronos and the Titans was terrible. Pontus and Gaia produced Thaumas, Porces, Cato, Irobie, and Nereus, the honest one, the truthful. The old man is called this name because he never errs, and he is gentle and remembers right, and knows the arts of mercy and the law. Nereus and Doris, a daughter of Oceanus, then produced 50 daughters, the sea nymphs, called commonly the Nereids, or daughters of Nereus. And Hesiod names all 50 of these, of which most of the names seem to be invented by the poet himself, while others are of notable importance in Greek mythology, like Thetis, who became the mother of Achilles. And we get more genealogy from Hesiod. Thaumas and Electra produced Iris of the rainbow and the lovely-haired Harpies. Cato and Phorcys produced the gray ones, whose hair was gray from their births, and the Gorgons, 3 of them, named Stheno, Euryale, and Medusa. Medusa was mortal, and Hesiod tells us that when she was killed eventually by the hero Perseus, Chrysaor and Pegasus the horse sprang from her corpse. She, Hesiod does not make clear who this she is, bore another monster, the terrible Echidna. Nothing like any mortal man, unlike any immortal god, for half of her is a fair-cheeked girl with glancing eyes, but half is a huge and frightening speckled snake. She eats raw flesh in a recess of the holy earth. Echidna would lie in love with Typho, terrible and proud and lawless, and they would produce many monsters. First, Orthos and Cerberus, multi-headed dogs. Then she bore the Hydra, who was destroyed by Heracles. And Chimera was born, who breathed awful fire, 3-headed, frightening, huge, swift-footed, strong, one head a bright-eyed lion's, one a goat's, and the third a snake's, a mighty dragon head. Chimera was subdued by Orthos and bore the deadly Sphinx, a curse on the men of Thebes, and the Nemean lion, who was also killed by Heracles. And Tythes bore to Oceanus the mighty rivers, the Nile, Alpheus, and the deep eddying Eridanus, Strymon, then Meander, Ister's lovely flowing stream, and Phasis, Rhasis, and the silver pools of Archillos and Nessus, Rhodius, then Halicimon, Heptoporus, and Granicus, Aesopus, bright Simois, Peneus, Hermus, gentle Caicus, Sangarius the Great, Parthenius, Ladon, Euenius, Aldiscus. Last, she bore Scamander, shining holy stream. Then Tythes bore to the great ocean many more daughters, 3,000 in all, called the Oceanids, the most important of which was Styx. Hesiod does not name all of these goddesses, but one imagines that he would if he could. There are many more rivers, he also tells us, but it is hard for mortal men to name them all, but they are known to those who live nearby. Then Thea and Hyperion created Helios, the sun, Selene, the moon, and Eos, the dawn. And Eurybae, with Krios, created Astraios, Pallas, and Perses. Astraios lay with Eos and produced the winds, Zephyros the west, Notos the south, Boreas the north. Then Eos bore the stars, which, shining, make a garland for the heavens. And Pallas slept with Styx, and she bore victory and glory, and power and force. These are always at the side of Zeus, for when the Thunderer called upon the immortals to fight with him against the Titans, he promised that whoever should fight by his side would not lose their rank and privileges, and those who had no honors would be granted them. So Styx was the first to come to Olympus, and she brought her children with her. Hesiod tells us, Zeus gave her honor and unequaled gifts, for she was made the great oath of the gods. Her children always live at Zeus's side. And as he promised, Zeus fulfilled his vows to all, and he rules greatly, and is Lord. The two Titans, Phoebe and Koios, then locked in love, and Phoebe gave birth to mild and kind Leto, Asteria, and lastly Hecate. Upon Hecate, Hesiod lingers and gives her more lines than most of the immortals that he mentions in the poem. He tells of how she is honored most by Zeus, and the gifts that she bestows on men. Zeus gave her glorious gifts, a share of heaven and of the barren sea. In starry heaven she has her place, and the immortal gods respect her greatly. Even now when men upon the earth, according to the rites, make handsome sacrifices, and entreat the gods for favor, Hecate is called. Great honors follow readily that man whose prayers the goddess graciously receives, and she can give him wealth. That power is hers. Of all the children earth and ocean bore, who once had privilege, she kept her due. The son of Cronos never did her harm, nor did he snatch away the rights she had under the Titan gods of old. She keeps her privilege in earth and sea and heaven, as it was portioned to her from the start. Nor did she get a lesser share because she had no brothers to defend her rights. Her share is greater. Zeus is her advocate. Help and success come to her favorites. In court she sits beside respected lords. In the assembly of the people, he whom she has chosen shines. And when men arm for man-destroying war, the goddess helps the men she wants to help, and eagerly brings victory and glorious fame to them. A splendid ally in the games when men compete. Then, too, she brings success and help. The man she favors wins by might and strength, and gains the lovely prize with ease and joy, and brings her parents glory. She is good to stand by horsemen, also good for those who work the rude gray sea, and those who pray to Hecate, and to the god who shakes the earth which crashes, gets great hauls from her. The glorious goddess, if she wishes it, but just as easily she takes away all she has given if she wants it so. And she is helpful in the stables too, along with Hermes, to increase the stock. The herds of cattle and of goats and flocks of woolly sheep grow numerous from few, if she is willing, or grow small from great. Thus, among all the honored, deathless gods, she is revered, although her mother bore no sons. The son of Cronos also made her nurse, and overseer of all the young, who from that day were born and came to see the light of dawn, who sees the world. And thus she is a nurse, and these are her high tasks. In Hesiod's world, Hecate must have been a very important goddess, one who was frequently prayed to and who had many shrines.